Hey, thanks for coming back to the channel. So this week I've done something a little different. Obviously this video didn't come out on Friday, it's Saturday, and I'm only shooting it now. So I think going forward, the new plan is to put some more content out during the week. Shorter videos, stuff that doesn't need its own full dedicated video, but that I want to get out anyway. I've been adding stuff like that to the website. So if you go on the website, check it out here. You can check out things like this week. I took a look at some work gloves, brief blog post and some examples and some ideas about what I've used over the years and where to find those. And that kind of stuff goes out on the website, go out on Instagram, social media, and maybe some shorter videos on YouTube, with the main video coming out either hopefully on Fridays, but this week I was busy all week with gigs, so from now on the main video is going to come out over the weekend. So sometimes it's just easier for me to do it that way. And when gigs pop up at the last minute, I have to take them. I'm a freelancer. Unfortunately, I don't have a very set schedule. So thanks for hanging in and putting up with the slight variance there. But don't worry, more content than before will be coming in coming weeks. I'm traveling out of the country at the end of this week for 2 weeks, so we'll see how that works. I'm working right now and trying to get internet and all that kind of stuff planned, but likely it'll be shorter, smaller videos while I'm out of town and stuff on social media as opposed to full-length YouTube videos, because I just simply won't have the connectivity. I'll have the time to shoot plenty of stuff and to edit, but just no connectivity to upload. So I'll have lots of cool footage from the road, and I will have lots of cool stuff to share with you when I get back and on social media while I'm there. So today we're talking about the Q bus, and it's one of those features on a console that I think gets so overlooked. Everybody always wants to talk about mic pre's when you talk about a console. I guarantee if you tell somebody you just mix on a console for the first time, whether it's a new or old console, one of the first questions, if not the only question they're going to ask, is what are the mic pre's like? There are so many different things in a signal chain between an artist giving a performance and what comes out the other end of a speaker. Even if you don't make any adjustments, just putting those things in the signal chain, there are so many parts along the way that dictate what comes out the other end, that talking about mic pre's on a live sound console in that context, as though it's the deciding factor between consoles, I think is just a little short-sighted. So obviously mic pre's do make a difference, but there are far more things in the signal chain that can make a bigger difference, and I think workflow is one of those. And personally for me, I would rather be working on a console that has a well-designed and flexible Q bus system than one that has absolutely the best mic pre's on the market. If I can get around and solo things and work the way I want to work by setting up a console to handle the Q bus the way I like it, I'm going to be much more effective and much more responsive to what's going on stage, and my mix will improve, I think, more than it would be improved by having a fancier mic pre. So, with that being said, we're going to take a look at the Q bus and how it's come to be what it is over the years. I feel like maybe every time I do one of these basics videos, I go and I rave on about how much better it is than even 10 or 15 years ago with analog. But I think it's important to continue to point out just the massive, massive paradigm shift we've seen in what our job entails, or the tools we have to do our job with, over just the past 15 years. None of this technology is particularly new. It's not like these digital console manufacturers are inventing new features. PFL, AFL, solo in place, all these different ways of operating a Q bus have existed for a long time. Generations of people have used these features on mixing boards. What is different is that the average person behind a mixing board now has access to all of those tools, all in the same place, with the flexibility to set them up just any way you want. And that's absolutely just a huge shift. Like I said, it's an incredible difference between 15 years ago, when we had none of these tools on smaller mixing boards, and then as you got into nicer mixing boards and more expensive high-end mixing boards, you would get them piecemeal. You might have the ability to change things around globally for the console. Certainly not on a per instance basis like we do now with digital consoles. So I hope that that helps to explain why, it comes off maybe as a little bit fanatical. Oh my God, digital's so much better. But for those of you who have grown up with digital consoles and mixing in the last 10 years or so, what was taking place even 5 years before that was a whole different world. So let's talk about the different ways we use the solo or Q bus on a mixer. And the most common way that we probably use it in live sound is with the PFL or pre-fade listen option. And that's just simply so you can, the term now is solo something. It's a term that Mackie pushed out into the market and made popular back in the 90s when they started adding it to their smaller mixers, something that just didn't exist before. So the idea that they started was that every time you plug an input into a console, you should solo that channel and adjust the head amp or the input trim until you're hitting about 0 on the PFL or solo meter, and then you're in the ballpark to have good gain staging throughout your console. As long as you don't clip that input there, you should be able to have enough signal to get through the rest of the console effectively. And that's a good way to approach mixing, but that was something that didn't exist, especially on cheaper live sound consoles until that point. You simply might not have a headphone or Q bus on a lot of consoles that was that independent. You might have been able to AFL or after fade listen like subgroups to hear an entire subgroup, or you could listen to the house, the left-right bus without putting it out in the house necessarily. But to be able to actually solo individual channels wasn't something that existed on the cheaper consoles, and they brought it down to a price point where it became mandatory for all the other manufacturers to also do that. And that's when you started to see the different versions and different options. So obviously PFL, pre-fade listen, that's when something's going on and we want to hear it. We just want to hear that input with nothing else, just straight off the input, straight off the microphone with as few things between it and the headphones as possible. You PFL something and you take a closer listen and see what's happening. Good for troubleshooting, diagnostics. If you're trying to figure out where a buzz or a hum is coming from, that's a great way to do it. And then you have AFL, which is after fade listen. So you're essentially doing the same type of thing. You can, you press the same button. If you're in AFL mode, you're hitting the solo button and you'll get that channel, but that what you're hearing is now going to be affected by the channel strip, including the fader. So if your fader for that channel is all the way down, you're not going to hear anything in your headphones. But also in addition to PFL and AFL, you can have what they call mix solo or last solo, and those are just options for being able to solo a bunch of things in either PFL or AFL mode and listen to them combined in your monitor, whether that is a physical monitor or a pair of headphones. And another great feature that you get on digital consoles now, something like the Yamaha CL5, where if you're mixing monitors for a band side stage and you've got wedges on stage and in-ears on stage, you can set up a dual Q system. There's a QA and a QB, and you can set one up to specifically be the wedge, one up to specifically be the stereo in-ear mix, and you can then choose on a channel and input and output basis which or both of those buses certain things get assigned to. So when you solo or AFL the mix going to your lead singer, for instance, that will automatically then come up in your in-ears as opposed to the wedge next to you. And you just have a ton of flexibility in that regard. And those are things that certainly didn't exist on live consoles and certainly not at any budget that you would find reasonable in years past. So some of the other things you can do with your solo bus, obviously you can use it to solo stuff up in your headphones, take a listen, troubleshoot. But another thing that's really interesting to do is now that we all have iPads and cell phones and oftentimes laptops on the job with us, is with the ability to have flexible routing over your solo bus, you can route it to any number of different outputs. It used to be, even if you had a good console that had flexible choice between AFL and PFL on the headphone output, you'd oftentimes only have that one amplified output for that bus, which is a shame because a really nice thing that I like to do with the headphone or Q bus is to connect it up to either an iPad or a laptop's microphone input and use it to solo things to an RTA or to analyzing software. You can use something as complex as Smart or Signal Scope on a laptop, on a computer, or you can use any number of RTA apps that are available for iOS and Android. And then when you solo something on the console into your headphones, you also get a readout on the screen. You get an RTA, a nice graphical display of what's happening. For critical inputs like a lead singer, where maybe you're on the edge of having some feedback issues, or you really want to take a look at what's happening on that microphone, you can turn on a waterfall graph and see through time what's happening on that channel with different frequencies. So if you're having issues where you're chasing intermittent little issues, to be able to look back on that graph as you have a channel soloed, and even if you're paying attention to something else, you could be working on sound check and or mixing the set, and you can have your lead singer's subgroup soloed over to your laptop. So if something happens there, you can quickly look back at a reference at that histogram and see what happened, a minute ago, or, obviously you'd want to get to issues quicker than that. Usually I'd like to have a 10-second window. It's really handy to have something like that. So when you hear something on a gig, you can look over and have a reference and use that along with your own experience to make an adjustment that's going to fix it. And the more you have that, it's a positive feedback loop there. The more you have the ability to hear something as a problem, and as you're going to make a change, have a real data point to compare your instinct to. I'm not suggesting mixing purely by the numbers, but to have those data points to reinforce your instincts will definitely sharpen your skills, especially with things like ear training and recognizing treble frequencies. The more you do that and the more you have that reinforcement of actual data points to look at. Nowadays with today's digital consoles, a lot of them have RTAs built in, and that's brilliant because it's the same thing. You don't necessarily want to mix based off the RTA, but when you do hear something that doesn't sound right to you, when you go to investigate, having those tools, having that extra set of tools there to work with is only going to make that process better and easier and more effective to help you make the change even faster in the future, when you can recognize exactly what's going on and correlate that to what you've seen on the data is really exciting. It helps you learn and progress and become more efficient at your job. And I think a lot of people maybe are afraid of relying on digital tools. I've heard that a lot over the years, like, oh, can't be using digital, from older people, I should say. Oh, that digital stuff, you really ought to be mixing with your ears. You're looking at screens and paging through menus. People love to cite that one as a reason not to mix digital, and I think that's it's silly. I think the more data you have at your fingertips, the more you're going to be effective in making choices on how to solve problems on gigs. Simple things like setting up a compressor, you should use your ears for sure. But to be able to have on a modern digital console the level of granularity we have now on just simple things like input, output, and gain reduction meters on a simple compressor built into a simple mixing board, to be able to have that data there, whether or not you set off relying upon it, which I don't think many people do, to reinforce your instincts and what you're hearing with actual data points makes your work repeatable and consistent. So, obviously you should be able to set a compressor, using your ears, listening and making critical adjustments to what you're hearing to get the result you're intending. But if you can reinforce the ability to do that with knowing what the data should be saying and looking like while you do that, your ability to make repeatable, consistent mixes is going to go up. There's no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, you don't have to rely on it as, you're not mixing by the numbers, but having that kind of tool set available is just always going to be a benefit, and it's going to progress how you mix by ear a lot faster than just making changes and hoping you remember in the future why or what happened. When you can correlate changes you're making to visual reinforcement and data and graphics, you're going to get more out of every situation you deal with on a job. You're going to learn more about why you did certain things, and that's always a benefit. So I hope in this video we can start a discussion and compare notes on what we're all doing with the Q Bus. My approach to it, using PFL and being able to stack mixes and hooking up an RTA on an iPad, is just the way I work, and I'd be interested to know how everybody else is using it. What do you use your Q Bus for most, and how do you use it, and how do you fit it into your workflow? I'm always interested to hear how other people approach things like this, and it's a subject that can really affect how you work. It's more so than anything else on the console, a unique way of interacting with your mix, with the audio coming in and going out, and everybody does it a little bit differently and uses it for slightly different objectives. So I'd be interested to see what kind of discussion we can get going, and let me know down below what you do with your Q Bus. If you haven't checked out the website yet, be sure to do so. You can click through to there from the About page, or just go to DcSoundOp.com. There's all sorts of resources. I've been adding free tools, any sort of software and downloads that I use and have found helpful over the years as a freelancer or as a live sound engineer can be found there. I'm keeping them up to date. So any software you might need for consoles, offline editors, weird things like that, or supplemental, like the supplemental Yamaha manuals, those PDFs and things, Bink's audio test CD. If you don't have that, go over and download it now. You need it. But I'm trying to keep that kind of stuff over there as a resource for everybody. So if you need to find that kind of stuff on, on demand, it'll be there for you and up to date. And hopefully that'll be a resource that everybody gets something out of. If you have any ideas or suggestions for things to be added to that, let me know. Shoot me a message, shoot me a comment. I'll put it up there. Definitely open to having more suggestions. I'd love to have as much stuff on there as possible that is useful as a resource to folks like us. Thanks for watching. If you like these videos, be sure to reach out on whatever social media you enjoy and say hello, or on email. It's great to meet folks that have watched the videos and have something interesting on their mind. It's been really interesting to talk to folks for the first time and hear how you're doing your job and help answer questions. And it's not about likes and subscribes. That's what this channel is all about, and I really enjoy getting to do that. So feel free to reach out and say hello, or just leave a comment below. Whatever you prefer. Hope to talk to you soon.